Evelyn Brooks arrived at her daughter's house in Connecticut soaked to the bone and cringing from the pain in her arthritic knees. She had just driven nearly 10 hours through unrelenting rain, gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles hurt. On the passenger seat, secured by a seat belt, was a carefully wrapped carrot cake, 3 layers of moist batter infused with cinnamon, topped with swirls of cream cheese frosting and miniature marzipan carrots. Baking that cake had taken her 2 days. She had hoped it would be the perfect surprise for Hannah Reed's 50th birthday. When she stepped inside, the foyer was bright and spacious. The polished tile gleamed under recessed lights. She braced herself, expecting a small gathering or perhaps a balloon or two, but the house was oddly still. Her plan was simple: tiptoe in, place the cake on the kitchen counter, and watch Hannah's face light up at the unexpected visit. Yet, as she ventured farther down the hallway, she could hear voices drifting from the kitchen. At first, it sounded like casual chit-chat, small laughter, the clink of utensils, a pot or pan scraping over a stove burner. Then she caught the unmistakable mention of her own name. She hesitated, unsure if she should announce her arrival or listen a moment longer. A mother's curiosity, perhaps a misguided impulse, pinned her in place. Hannah's voice, carrying an impatient edge, I swear. If she'd just crashed that old sedan, we'd finally get a break from her calls. Maybe she'll get lost in this storm and spare us the guilt trip. A male chuckle followed. That had to be Nathan, Hannah's husband. For all we know, she's too stubborn to crash. She'll just keep pushing her way into our life, no matter what we say. In that instant, Evelyn's heart lurched. She clutched the cake carrier tighter, the moisture on its plastic sides making her grip slippery. Each hateful word stuck like a thorn in her mind. The woman who had driven half a day to celebrate her daughter was unwelcome, a burden, someone they wished would simply disappear. Her eyes stung with tears she fought to hold back. She edged forward to the threshold of the kitchen and caught sight of Hannah stirring a pot while Nathan leaned against the counter. Their laughter was casual, unhurried, completely unaware of the devastation they'd just caused with offhand remarks. The intimacy of that cruelty, the ease with which they dismissed her, throbbed in Evelyn's chest. She wanted to confront them, to set the cake down and demand an explanation. Instead, fear and sorrow rooted her in silence. What could she possibly say to repair this? The realization that her own child could wish her gone filled her with a sense of deep betrayal. She took a shaky breath, set the cake on a side table in the hallway, and turned around. Tears blurred her vision as she slipped back out the front door. Her coat was still soaked, raindrops splashing at her ankles and seeping into her shoes. The weight of the heartbreak seemed heavier than the storm raging outside. In her mind, the laughter echoed, mocking every ounce of love and sacrifice she had poured into Hannah's life. Her old sedan waited in the driveway, the wipers still squeaking in a valiant effort to push away the deluge. As Evelyn climbed inside, she could barely breathe. She tried not to envision the carrot cake abandoned in the hallway, the painstaking hours of baking rendered meaningless. She should have been inside, hugging her daughter, hearing a bright mom in greeting. Instead, she was running from the cruelty of the very people who should have cared. In that cold, wet darkness, she turned the key in the ignition. The engine sputtered, then came to life. The only logical step was to leave. Leave Hannah to her harsh words. Leave the birthday dinner that never included her. Evelyn pulled onto the road, tears mingling with the rain that smeared her windshield. She told herself she was done with illusions and, perhaps, done with Hannah's version of love. Evelyn drove aimlessly, at first not even sure in which direction she was headed. The heartbreak pulsed in her chest like a bruise that wouldn't fade. After nearly an hour of navigating dark, slick roads, She glimpsed a flickering neon sign on the outskirts of a small town. It read Pine Haven Motel Vacancy. Weariness weighed on her bones, so she turned in, figuring she'd find a room for the night rather than risk driving back to Millbridge, Maine, in her distraught state. The motel was a shabby relic chipped paint on cinder block walls, a single row of rooms with thin windows. Despite her exhaustion, she felt a vague sense of shame, checking in like this was the last place she expected to be on the night she'd planned to celebrate her daughter's milestone birthday. Inside the motel office, an older desk clerk with tired eyes barely looked up as he processed her credit card. She offered only a tight-lipped smile. A musty odor clung to the interior of room 6. Yellow-tinted light bulbs and outdated lamps cast a sickly glow on the threadbare bedspread. Evelyn shut the door and stared at the worn carpet, waves of despair crashing over her. The voices replayed in her head. She's too stubborn to crash. Maybe she'll get lost. Biting back tears, she peeled off her soaked coat and draped it over a chair. Her knees throbbed, but she sank to the bed without tending them. The day had been a marathon of physical discomfort, overshadowed by this deeper emotional agony. She checked her phone, half hoping to see a message from Hannah. There was one missed call from an unknown number, possibly a spam call. No texts from her daughter. No sign of guilt or worry. Evelyn let the phone clatter onto the small nightstand. Her eyes wandered over the pale wallpaper, stained from water damage in the corner. She felt an urge to cry again, but anger flickered inside her, providing a grim sort of energy. How could Hannah treat her like that after all these years Evelyn had braved storms, literal and figurative, to support her daughter's aspirations? She had co-signed loans, offered financial gifts that were never truly repaid, and tried to be a presence in Hannah's busy adult life. The small alarm clock on the nightstand showed it was already past midnight. Rain still tapped restlessly at the window. Evelyn forced herself to the bathroom, where she splashed cold water on her face and studied her reflection. Gray wisps of hair framed lined cheeks. Her eyes, red-rimmed from crying, reflected both hurt and a spark of indignation. She realized she had put off seeing the truth. Hannah's resentment had been growing for years, manifesting in smaller dismissive comments, politely cloaked excuses, and abrupt phone calls that always ended before any real conversation could begin. She clung to the edge of the sink, telling herself to breathe. The ache in her chest roared every time she remembered the casual cruelty in Hannah's tone. But how was she supposed to move on from this discovery? She couldn't just go home and pretend it hadn't happened. Slipping into a nightgown from her small suitcase, Evelyn lowered herself into the creaking bed. The mattress sagged uncomfortably, but she was too drained to care. She wanted to sleep, to shut out the memory of that brief, devastating eavesdrop in the kitchen. Yet, when she turned off the lamp, images of Hannah's face looped in her mind. Hannah stirring a pot, laughing about her mother being out of the picture. Evelyn clenched her teeth, blinking into the darkness. "I deserve better than that," she whispered, unsure if she was trying to convince herself. She had spent so long hoping Hannah would show more warmth or appreciation. Now she knew the ugly truth: her calls and visits were merely obligations, met with secret hostility. She rolled onto her side and closed her eyes, determined to find sleep. Tomorrow, she decided, she would drive home. She needed space to think, to consider what came next. The one certainty was that this was a turning point. She could no longer ignore the rift that had grown between them. With tears finally subsiding into fitful exhaustion, she slipped into restless dreams, uncertain if she could ever truly mend the bond that had just been so thoroughly broken. Sunlight pierced through the threadbare curtains the next morning, startling Evelyn awake. She felt stiff, an ache radiating from her knees and back. The digital clock on the nightstand read 7:14 a.m. She grimaced at the memory of why she was in a motel at all, quickly recalling the events of the previous night. Her entire body sagged with fresh sorrow. After a short shower under lukewarm water, she dressed in the same slacks and sweater she'd worn the day before. Her coat, still damp at the hem, lay draped over the lone chair. As she slipped it on, she felt a subtle shift inside her, a resolve to confront the realities she had been ignoring for too long. Over a complimentary coffee in the motel's small lobby, she scrolled through her phone for any messages. Still nothing from Hannah. Her jaw set with a twinge of anger. She dreaded the long drive back to Millbridge, but it was her only option. She tossed the half-finished coffee into a trash bin and headed out to her sedan. The sky finally clear after the long storm. The road stretched for miles, giving her ample time to reflect on the trajectory of her relationship with Hannah. It hadn't always been this broken. When Hannah was a child, they were close. Evelyn had nurtured her daughter's interests: dance lessons, science fairs, reading marathons. Harold, Evelyn's late husband, had been in the military, gone for stretches of time, so mother and daughter formed a tight bond. But after Harold passed away, Hannah was already living in another state, newly married to Nathan. The phone calls were frequent at first, but soon overshadowed by requests: a down payment for a new house, money for renovations, co-signing a loan to help Nathan's business ventures. Evelyn, still grieving her husband and desperate to remain close to her daughter, agreed to these arrangements. She assumed her generosity would keep a strong bond intact. Instead, each transaction seemed to breed more distance. Eventually, visits became sporadic, Hannah citing busy schedules, demanding jobs, social obligations. Evelyn noticed how rarely Hannah and Nathan came to see her, even as she sent them bigger checks for birthdays or holidays. A quiet shame took root in Evelyn, though she refused to admit it. She was paying to stay relevant in her daughter's life and receiving resentment in return. Images of the past filled her mind like a parade the Christmas Hannah didn't show up for, claiming an emergency at work, only for Evelyn to spot photos of a skiing trip on social media. The times Hannah spoke to her in that forced, polite tone that barely hid annoyance. All those occasions Evelyn tried to help financially, believing it was the right thing for a mother to do. By the time she approached the highway exit for Millbridge, Evelyn felt drained. The sign welcomed her to the small town she had called home for decades, with its neat rows of houses and familiar local shops. She turned onto her quiet street, the houses set back from wide sidewalks. Her own colonial-style home stood near the end, sporting white shutters and a porch where she once drank tea with Harold on late summer evenings. Parking in the driveway. She let out a heavy breath. The house carried so many memories: good, bad, everything in between. Now, she realized how alone she had become inside these walls. She gathered her overnight bag, locked the sedan, and trudged up the steps. Before she could even unlock the front door, her neighbor and longtime friend, Grace Holloway, emerged from next door, calling her name. "Evelyn, are you all right?" Grace asked, hurrying over. She was a petite woman with a warm, motherly presence. Evelyn forced a weak smile. "I'm fine. Grace, just tired. I called you last night, but it went straight to voicemail. I was worried." Grace paused, reading the exhaustion and sorrow in Evelyn's expression. Did something happen with Hannah? Evelyn bit her lip, tears threatening once again. She gave a brief nod. "I overheard her saying terrible things about me. I left before she saw me." She swallowed. "I've been lying to myself for too long." Grace's eyes filled with compassion. "Come inside," she said, guiding Evelyn toward her own house. "Ay, sissy." You need some tea and a friend right now. Evelyn allowed herself to be led into Grace's cozy living room. As she settled into an armchair, the tears she'd held back finally sprang forth. Grace quietly made a pot of chamomile tea, then returned, crouching beside Evelyn. "It's going to be all right," Grace murmured, though both knew it wouldn't be so simple. "Whatever was said, you can get through this." Evelyn let out a trembling breath, recounting the heartbreaking conversation she'd overheard. The words spilled in a hushed torrent: Hannah's wish for Evelyn to vanish, Nathan's casual agreement, the humiliation of leaving the carrot cake behind. Grace listened, occasionally pressing a comforting hand to Evelyn's arm. By the time Evelyn finished, she was shaky with sorrow, but also felt an undercurrent of indignation. "I've helped them so much," she whispered, "and they don't even want me around." Grace sighed. "Sometimes people show their worst sides when they think no one is listening. But this goes deeper. Have you checked how much financial entanglement you have with them? They might be milking you dry." Evelyn looked up, tears still in her eyes. "I always assumed they were paying everything off responsibly, but I never truly checked the statements or asked for proof." The realization that her good intentions may have facilitated her own disrespect made her heart sink. Grace nodded, pressing her lips into a firm line. "Then that's your next step. You deserve to know exactly how they've been using your credit and your trust." The idea felt like opening a door to a dark, cluttered room, uncertain what horrors might be found. But after hearing Hannah's cruelty, Evelyn understood she owed it to herself to stop living in illusions. She wiped her eyes, fighting the fatigue and heartache, and whispered, "Yes, let's find out." 2 days later, Evelyn sat in the modest living room of her own house, laptop open on the coffee table, phone pressed to her ear. She was speaking with Mr. Foley, the manager at her local bank in Millbridge. With each passing minute, the list of co-signed accounts and guarantees grew longer. "All right, Mrs. Brooks, Mr. Foley said, his tone carefully neutral. "As we see here, you are listed as a guarantor on 4 credit cards under Hannah and Nathan Reed's names. Each has a balance near its limit, so the combined debt is around $50,000. There's also a personal loan, $30,000, where you're the co-signer, and that's not including any separate mortgage or home equity lines they may hold in another institution." Evelyn's hands shook as she scribbled notes onto a pad. She spotted Grace across the room, perched on the edge of a dining chair, eyes wide. Grace had offered moral support, insisting she not navigate this alone. "Do you see any references to property loans?" Evelyn asked, keeping her voice level despite the panic rising in her chest. Mr. Foley hesitated. "Yes, we have a record that you co-signed a home equity line of credit for Hannah and Nathan's property in Connecticut. The amount is $70,000, and it's still active. Payment history is sporadic but current as of last month. However, if they default, the lender could pursue your assets, depending on the terms." Evelyn clenched her jaw. "Thank you for verifying," she managed. "That's all for now." She ended the call, her shoulders slumping. The total was staggering, well over $100,000 if she added everything up, plus the risk of the home equity loan. She glanced at Grace, shaking her head in disbelief. "I knew I'd co-signed a few things, but I never imagined it was this deep." Grace nodded sympathetically. "They've been using your credit as a safety net, and from what you said, they resent you for it." Evelyn's mind swirled with conflicting emotions: anger, sadness, betrayal. She remembered each moment Hannah asked for help, a tearful phone call about mounting bills, a heartfelt promise that it was only a temporary solution. Evelyn had felt needed, and she had wanted to be supportive. She had no clue how thoroughly it all added up. "Enough," she murmured, setting her notes aside. "I have to stop this. They can't keep tying me to debts if they wish I'd crash my car. It's insane. Grace leaned forward. Then let's see a lawyer. You can remove yourself from guarantees or at least refuse to sign anything new. If Hannah and Nathan want to threaten your financial security, they should be prepared for the fallout. Evelyn gave a grim nod. You're right. I need professional guidance to disentangle myself from them. Let them stand on their own 2 feet. A spark of righteous anger flared within her. She realized that for years she had latched onto any semblance of Hannah's attention, using money as a bridge. Now, Hannah's true feelings were exposed, turning that bridge into a cold, hollow structure. She might not be able to reclaim the tens of thousands already at risk, but she could certainly stop any further entanglement. She paused, looking around her living room framed photos of Hannah, wedding portraits, snapshots of mother and daughter in happier times. It hurt to think about severing the tie, but she understood it might be necessary for her own well-being. Without boundaries, she'd only keep fueling Hannah's resentment. Grace gave her arm a reassuring squeeze. You're doing the right thing. Evelyn took a deep breath. I hope so, because it feels awful and liberating at the same time. That night, before turning in, she drafted an email to an estate attorney named Veronica Sharp, recommended by a local friend. She outlined her situation briefly and requested an appointment. Staring at the send button, she felt her heart pound. Once she proceeded, there would be no turning back to her old pattern of complacency. She clicked it. As she closed her laptop, she whispered to herself, I deserve respect or nothing at all. For the first time in ages, she allowed herself to believe she was worthy of better than Hannah's cold disregard. Perhaps adversity would force Hannah to reveal who she truly was. Evelyn braced herself for the days to come, uncertain if her only child would ever look at her with genuine affection again. 3 afternoons later, Evelyn and Grace stepped into the polished office of Veronica Sharp, who specialized in estate planning and family law. The waiting area was calm, with plush chairs and soft instrumental music piping from hidden speakers. A tall window overlooked the quaint downtown street of Millbridge. Evelyn's stomach churned with anticipation. Soon, they were ushered into Veronica's private office, where the attorney, tall, silver-haired, and wearing a crisp blazer, rose to greet them. Good afternoon, she said warmly. Evelyn Brooks, correct? Please have a seat. Grace took a chair off to the side, while Evelyn settled into one facing Veronica's desk. After initial pleasantries, Evelyn began explaining her situation, the overheard comments, the staggering debt under her name, the years of co-signing without thorough oversight. Her voice quivered at times, but she pressed on. When she finished, Veronica leaned back in her chair, eyes serious. It's more common than you'd think, especially with older parents and adult children, Veronica said gently. The emotional toll can be devastating, but you do have legal options. Evelyn clasped her hands in her lap. Where do I start? Veronica laid out a practical roadmap. First, she could notify each creditor that she was withdrawing as guarantor for any future charges. That wouldn't erase the existing debt, but it would prevent Hannah and Nathan from increasing balances under Evelyn's liability. For loans already in place, the banks might require them to refinance solely in their names or face stricter terms. It could be messy, but it was doable. Expect pushback, Veronica warned. Your daughter may panic when the lenders demand new collateral. She may accuse you of being cruel, but you have every right to protect your finances. Evelyn glanced at Grace, who nodded in support, then addressed Veronica again. I also want to change my will. I don't know if I should leave everything to Hannah anymore. A flash of empathy passed over Veronica's face. That's entirely your choice. Children don't automatically inherit if you decide otherwise. Assuming your mental competency is clear, you can leave your estate to whomever you choose. Evelyn pressed her lips together, tears threatening to form. I always assumed Hannah would get my house, my savings, my possessions. But now I realize she doesn't even want me around. Maybe the local women's shelter or some charity would appreciate it more. Grace shifted slightly. Taking Evelyn's hand, you'll decide what feels right. At least consider leaving a trust for potential grandchildren, if that makes sense. Evelyn's heart gave a pang at the thought of grandchildren, who might never exist or, if they did, might be raised in an environment that resented her. We'll see, she murmured. Veronica outlined how she would draft the revised will, removing or reducing Hannah's share if that was Evelyn's wish, and possibly establishing charitable bequests. Evelyn, though sad, felt a certain relief wash over her. By reclaiming her autonomy, she was beginning to heal the deep cut Hannah's words had inflicted. Before leaving, Veronica summarized the next steps. She'd send revocation letters to each creditor, notify them that Evelyn was no longer guaranteeing future debts, and then draft the new will. Evelyn stood, shaking Veronica's hand. A tremor of anxiety mixed with resolve coursed through her. Once these letters went out, Hannah and Nathan would know Evelyn was serious about severing the financial pipeline. Outside the office, Grace slipped an arm around Evelyn's waist. "Proud of you," she whispered. "I know it's painful, but this is the right move." Evelyn managed a small smile, though her eyes were red. "Thank you for being here. I couldn't face this alone." She inhaled the crisp air of downtown Millbridge, vowing to find solace in the fact she was finally standing up for herself, even if it meant the end of her old illusions about Hannah. At least she could reclaim her self-respect. Within a week, Veronica Sharp had prepared formal letters to all relevant creditors. Each letter explained that Evelyn Brooks was withdrawing as guarantor on Hannah and Nathan Reed's credit cards, personal loans, and any open lines of credit not in full repayment status. For the mortgage-related obligations, a more complex notification advised lenders that Evelyn would no longer back any additional borrowing or refinancing. The process was intricate, but Veronica insisted it was the surest way to insulate Evelyn's assets from Hannah and Nathan's financial decisions. On a cloudy morning, Evelyn opened her mailbox to find a thick envelope containing copies of the letters. She leafed through them at her kitchen table, her throat tightening. The language was formal, each letter stating the same core truth: she was done enabling them. Grace, seated beside her, offered a silent nod of affirmation. Evelyn pictured Hannah's reaction when these notices arrived. She envisioned phone calls from the bank, credit limits dropping, interest rates spiking. A jolt of guilt flitted through her. Was she punishing her daughter too severely? Then she recalled Hannah's scornful tone, the casual cruelty implying her mother's worth was nil beyond a checkbook. Evelyn's resolve hardened. Days went by in tense anticipation. Evelyn kept herself busy, volunteering at the local library and pulling weeds in her small flower garden. She slept fitfully, bracing for the inevitable confrontation. Finally, on a late afternoon, her phone vibrated with an incoming call from Hannah. She stared at the screen, heart pounding. For a moment, she considered letting it go to voicemail, but something in her urged her to answer, if only to face what she had set in motion. "Hello," Evelyn said quietly. "Mom?" Hannah's voice sounded shrill with panic. "What the hell is going on? We got letters from the bank saying you've canceled your guarantee. Our credit lines are at risk of being shut down." Nathan's furious. "Did you do this?" Evelyn forced a calm tone. "Yes, I did. You can't just pull out like that." Hannah screeched. "We have balances we're paying off. If they close the accounts or reduce limits, we'll be in serious trouble." "Why are you doing this to us?" I'm protecting myself, Evelyn replied, gripping the phone until her fingers ached. You said you wished I'd crash my car, that you wanted me out of your hair. I have no intention of continuing to fund people who despise me, Hannah spluttered. It was just venting. We were stressed, dealing with bills. And yes, I was annoyed by all your calls, but you're overreacting. The anger in Evelyn's chest glowed like embers. Am I? You asked for my name on a dozen financial documents, then turned around and belittled me. No more, Hannah. You'll have to manage on your own. I'm done risking my future for people who don't care about me as a person. Hannah fell silent for a moment. Evelyn could almost hear her daughter's mind racing. Then came the inevitable attempt at bargaining. But we were planning to get a new place. We needed your good credit score to finalize the mortgage. Mom, you can't back out now. We're in the middle of negotiations. Evelyn's throat tightened with a bitter laugh. I had no idea about that. Another thing you did behind my back. It's not my responsibility. Hannah, so you're just going to watch us drown? I'm your daughter. Hannah's voice cracked, indignation laced with desperation. Tears pricked Evelyn's eyes, but she blinked them away. It never seemed to matter to you except for money. I'm hanging up now. Mom Hannah started, but Evelyn ended the call. She stared at her phone, heart hammering, as the silence of her living room closed in. She thought of the little girl Hannah had once been, so full of curiosity and sweetness. How had they drifted to this point, setting the phone aside? Evelyn leaned back on the couch, tears sliding down her cheeks. Despite the ache in her heart, she felt a certain liberation. She had told Hannah the truth, something she had avoided for years. It might shatter their relationship further, but it also freed Evelyn from the constant dread of being used and ridiculed. Outside, the clouds parted, letting a soft ray of sun fall through the window. Evelyn wiped her tears and told herself that, for once, she was truly standing on solid ground. She couldn't fix her daughter's life, but she could salvage her own. In the days following that tense phone call, the fallout began. Hannah left multiple voicemails, each more frantic than the last, demanding Evelyn reinstate the guarantees. Nathan also called once, a furious tirade that ended when Evelyn quietly hung up. She tried to brace herself for the emotional toll, but even so, her nerves frayed each time the phone rang. Then, one evening, the calls stopped. For nearly a week, Evelyn heard nothing from Hannah or Nathan, except a brief message from an unknown number that said, "You'll regret this," which she suspected was Nathan. The tone felt threatening, but she refused to engage. She carried her phone around with muted anxiety, bracing for whatever would come next. Meanwhile, Grace helped her draft a short letter to Hannah, reiterating her stance. Evelyn was open to a genuine, respectful relationship, but not as a financial crutch. She sealed the envelope with trembling hands and mailed it, uncertain if Hannah would read or toss it. One morning, a knock came at Evelyn's door. She peered out to see a uniformed courier holding a sealed manila envelope. Her stomach plummeted, suspecting some legal notice from Hannah. She opened the door and signed for the delivery. Inside the envelope, she found a letter from Hannah's mortgage lender, addressed to Evelyn, requesting she clarify her intent to withdraw from certain documents. The letter stated that if Evelyn refused to reaffirm her guarantor status, the entire loan might be subject to renegotiation or foreclosure processes. A wave of guilt stirred, but she steeled herself, passing it along to Veronica Sharp to handle the official reply. Oh, bien. The next day, Evelyn decided she couldn't remain in the house. Waiting for more bad news, she visited the local women's shelter, where she had volunteered sporadically in the past. The director, Ms. Vargas, welcomed her warmly. "It's been a while," Evelyn, Ms. Vargas said, guiding her into a comfortable lounge area where a few residents chatted quietly. We always need extra hands if you're interested. Over the course of a few hours, Evelyn helped organize donated clothing, listened to a young mother share her difficulties, and felt an odd sense of solace in the shared stories of betrayal, heartbreak, and survival. When Miss Vargas asked what prompted her renewed interest in volunteering, Evelyn hesitated, then admitted some of her troubles with Hannah, though she kept specifics vague. Ms. Vargas gave a compassionate nod. We see all kinds of family dynamics here, Porfexing. Sometimes the deepest wounds come from those closest to us. When Evelyn returned home that evening, she felt calmer, more purposeful. Yes, her relationship with Hannah might be crumbling, but she had the power to direct her resources towards something that mattered. She decided then to leave a significant portion of her estate to the shelter, a place that could truly benefit from her legacy. Later that week, she received another call, this time from Hannah's mother-in-law, Mary Reed. Evelyn, Mary began hesitantly. Hannah and Nathan said you're pulling away all financial support. They told us you're trying to sabotage their lives. What's going on? Evelyn winced at that framing. I'm not sabotaging anything. I'm simply done being a guarantor for people who've insulted me. Hannah never mentioned the cruel things she said. Mary faltered. She just said you misunderstood a private conversation, nothing serious. She's pregnant now. Evelyn, we just learned. She wanted to wait until the second trimester to share. That revelation hit like a punch in the gut. Hannah was pregnant. Evelyn's throat tightened. All the guilt, anger, and sadness tangled in her mind. If Hannah truly expected a child, the stakes had changed. But did that justify continuing to be used? Probably not. Still, tears stung Evelyn's eyes. I didn't know, she finally said, but it doesn't change how I've been treated. Mary sounded apologetic. I understand. We're just worried about the baby and the finances. Maybe you and Hannah can talk it out. She needs support. Evelyn couldn't stop the tears rolling down her cheeks. I want to help if it's truly about the baby's well-being, but I can't let her walk all over me. Hannah left me no choice. When the call ended, Evelyn sat in stunned silence. A grandchild. She had been waiting years for such news, imagining a sweet moment of announcement, tears of joy. Now it felt overshadowed by betrayal and rancor. For the rest of the night, she tossed in bed, wondering if she was condemning an innocent child to a life of struggle. Yet Hannah's cruelty remained fresh, a barrier to easy forgiveness. In the hush of 3 a.m., Evelyn murmured into the darkness, "How can I love a grandchild when the mother wishes me gone?" No answer came, but she knew she couldn't revert to old patterns. This was bigger than finances. It was about respect and honesty, things she had lost in Hannah's house that stormy night. For the next month, Evelyn navigated a maelstrom of mixed emotions. On one hand, the possibility of becoming a grandmother weighed on her heart, bringing fleeting hopes of reconciliation. On the other, Hannah's repeated calls, now tinged with fresh desperation, made it clear that money was still at the forefront of her daughter's concerns. One chilly November morning, Evelyn's phone rang again with Hannah's number. She nearly let it go to voicemail, dreading another tirade, but a whisper of curiosity made her pick up. She expected anger, but instead, Hannah's voice was subdued, almost timid. Mom, I wanted to let you know that the baby's doing all right. The doctor says everything looks healthy. A swirl of emotions coursed through Evelyn's chest relief, lingering betrayal and cautious joy. That's good news, she managed. Hannah hesitated. I also wanted to say, I'm sorry for how I spoke to you. I was overwhelmed. Nathan and I have been struggling, and we took it out on you. I shouldn't have said those things. Evelyn's grip on the phone tightened. She had waited months to hear an apology. I appreciate that, she said softly, fighting the urge to cry. But you have to understand, I can't go back to being your co-signer. I'm not asking that, Hannah said quietly. Look, the pregnancy has made me think. I've been talking to a therapist. She says I hold a lot of resentment for how Dad died and how you clung to me afterward. I felt guilty, but I also felt suffocated. It doesn't justify what I said, but at least I know where it's coming from. Evelyn closed her eyes. The mention of Harold's death still stung, even all these years later. I never meant to suffocate you, she whispered. I was lonely. I get that now, Hannah replied. A pause. So, can we at least talk? Like, not about money. Maybe get coffee. A spark of cautious hope flared. Evelyn exhaled slowly. All right, but let's keep finances off the table. Deal, Hannah said. Her tone carried relief, though Evelyn felt uncertainty flicker in her chest. Perhaps Hannah had turned a corner, but she wasn't ready to fully believe it yet. Still, it was enough of a gesture for them to meet at a small cafe halfway between their towns the following week. When the day came, the encounter felt strange, like reuniting with an old friend after a painful fallout. Hannah's belly was beginning to show, and she wore a loose sweater. She looked tired, but a hint of softness replaced the hostility once so evident in her face. They talked awkwardly at first, topics ranging from the weather to the baby's due date. Evelyn's heart clenched when Hannah described morning sickness and feeling the first flutters of movement. It was the kind of conversation they should have shared joyfully from the start, not under a cloud of strife. Still, it was better than nothing. Hannah explained how they had sold their large house and moved into a smaller rental, forcing them to cut expenses. Nathan took on a second job to manage debts. It's been humbling, she admitted, her cheeks reddening. But we'll survive, Evelyn nodded, stirring her coffee. I'm not happy you've struggled, but I think it's important you and Nathan learn to manage on your own. Me too, Hannah said quietly. When I realized how dependent we were on your credit, it scared me. I guess I blamed you instead of seeing my own mistakes. They parted with a tentative hug. Not quite comfortable, but more genuine than any embrace they'd shared in years, for the first time in months. Evelyn left feeling a kernel of hope lodged in her chest. Perhaps, with the baby on the horizon, Hannah was discovering humility, but Evelyn reminded herself that an apology was not the same as trust restored. She braced for the possibility that old patterns could re-emerge. Nevertheless, she drove back to Millbridge, reflecting on how different this conversation felt compared to their last volatile exchange. If there was any real chance to rebuild their bond, it would take time, honesty, and mutual respect. For now, Evelyn found solace in the fact that they had managed to speak without hurling accusations or demands. It was a small step, but a step nonetheless. As December approached, Evelyn made no grand plans with Hannah. The wound between them remained tender, so a joint holiday celebration seemed premature. Yet, the lines of communication, though fragile, stayed open. Hannah texted occasionally, sharing how she was coping with pregnancy cravings, or how cold her rental apartment was. She did not ask for money. On Christmas Eve, Evelyn baked a modest batch of gingerbread cookies, placing them on a tray next to a handwritten card. She mulled over whether to send them to Hannah. Ultimately, she decided to do so, including a short note. I hope you're taking care of yourself. Merry Christmas. Mom, she shipped them overnight, half expecting them to go unacknowledged. Early on Christmas morning, the phone rang. The caller ID showed Hannah's name. Evelyn set down her steaming mug of tea and took a steadying breath. Hello, Mom. The cookies arrived, Hannah said, her voice carrying a warmth that sounded almost childlike. "They're so good. Thank you." A small sniffle followed. "I wish we could be together, but Nathan's working. We need the extra shifts. Still, this means a lot." Evelyn smiled to herself, relief warming her chest. "I'm glad you like them. Maybe next year we can celebrate in person if things feel right." "Yeah," Hannah agreed softly. There was a pause. "Listen, I know it's not the same as being there in person, but I appreciate you thinking of me. And the baby. I promise I'm not going to ask you for anything else." Evelyn's heart tightened. "Thank you for saying that. I'd love to be part of the baby's life, but only if you genuinely want me there." Hannah hesitated. "I do. I mean, I want that eventually, if we can keep things calm. Maybe you can visit in January to see how we've set up a tiny nursery in the corner of our bedroom." Tears pricked Evelyn's eyes. "I'd like that very much." They ended the call, and Evelyn spent the rest of Christmas Day in quiet reflection. She visited Grace for an afternoon cup of tea, recounting the unexpected warmth in Hannah's voice. While Grace congratulated her on the progress, she also cautioned, "Keep your guard up. Don't let illusions rush you back into old patterns." Evelyn nodded. She was determined to protect her financial boundaries, no matter how sincere Hannah's regrets seemed. But at least for this holiday, she felt a measure of hope. She placed an unopened gift for Hannah under her own small tree, an elegant baby blanket she had knitted in neutral pastel tones, uncertain if or when she would deliver it in person. The days between Christmas and New Year's passed quietly. Millbridge saw its first major snowfall, blanketing lawns and rooftops in white. Evelyn busied herself with volunteer work at the shelter, where she witnessed women forging new paths, unencumbered by abusive partners or controlling family members. Their resilience inspired her. If they could rebuild their lives, she could maintain her stance and see if Hannah would truly meet her halfway. On New Year's Eve, Evelyn watched the clock strike midnight from her cozy living room. She allowed herself a small toast of sparkling cider, raising a glass to the battered but living bond between mother and daughter. She whispered a silent resolution: "Let this year be one of honesty and respect." As fireworks crackled in the distance, Evelyn nestled a blanket around her shoulders, letting gratitude flow for what little progress had emerged from tragedy. She had gained clarity, built new boundaries, and found a shred of potential reconciliation. Above all, she had discovered that she was stronger than she ever realized, and that knowledge felt like the best gift she could have given herself. Late in January, Evelyn made the drive to Hannah's small rental apartment, a deliberate choice this time rather than a hasty surprise. The roads were clear of ice, the winter sun low and golden over the barren trees. Each mile drew her closer to her daughter and her granddaughter to be. She carried a bag of simple gifts: the knitted baby blanket, a few children's books, a jar of homemade applesauce. The apartment building was a modest two-story structure with chipped paint and poorly lit hallways. Evelyn couldn't help but notice the contrast between this place and the spacious home Hannah had once occupied. A swirl of conflicting emotions rose: pity, hope, regret. Hannah opened the door, belly unmistakably round beneath a loose sweater. Her eyes lit with a cautious but genuine smile. "Mom, come in." Evelyn stepped inside, finding a living area crammed with basic furniture and boxes stacked in the corner. The aroma of tomato soup simmering on the stove top filled the air. She offered a gentle hug, feeling the baby bump press lightly between them. Nathan appeared from the tiny kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. He looked tired, faint shadows under his eyes, but he managed a small nod. "Hello, Evelyn." She responded politely. Noticing a marked difference in his demeanor gone was the smugness she remembered, replaced by a subdued, almost apologetic air. The tension was thick, but no one raised voices. "Can I get you coffee or tea?" Hannah asked, edging into the kitchen. "Tea, please," Evelyn said, placing her gift bag on a small dining table. Nathan shuffled aside to let her pass. The corner of the living room served as a makeshift nursery, with a portable crib and a few shelves stacked with diapers. A simple set of pastel decals dotted the wall. Evelyn's heart wrenched at the sight, so humble, yet clearly prepared with care. As they sipped tea, conversation started hesitantly, each topic handled with care. Hannah described her prenatal appointments, the occasional nausea, and the swirl of emotions that came with impending motherhood. Evelyn asked questions, mindful not to pry too far into finances or weigh them down with unsolicited advice. Eventually, Nathan cleared his throat. "I want to say sorry for everything that happened, stuff we said, how we treated you. We weren't fair, and we took advantage of your generosity. I know an apology doesn't fix it all, but I wanted to say it." Evelyn felt tears prickle. She hadn't expected a direct apology from Nathan. "Thank you. I appreciate that. I just want us to respect each other. No more hidden agendas. No more guilt trips." He nodded gravely. "Understood." Hannah, shifting uncomfortably on the couch, reached for Evelyn's hand. "I also need you to know I'm not asking for money or co-signatures. If we can do things differently, maybe we'll have a healthier relationship and set a better example for the baby." Evelyn squeezed Hannah's hand, hope unfolding within her. "That's all I ask. Let me be here as your mother, not as a financial resource." They chatted more freely after that. Hannah unwrapped the baby blanket, tears shining in her eyes at the soft pastel yarn. She pressed it against her belly as if picturing the newborn wrapped inside. Nathan, though quieter, seemed genuinely relieved that no one was mentioning debts or mortgages. When Evelyn left that afternoon, she hugged her daughter again. "Call me if you need moral support. Hannah, I'll come whenever I can." Hannah's eyes brimmed with emotion. "I will, Mom. I really will." The drive home felt lighter, despite the gray skies. Evelyn replayed the day's events, cautiously optimistic. They still had a gulf of painful history between them, but at least now there was mutual recognition of the damage done. Forgiveness would take time, trust even longer, but they had at least opened a door, not slammed it shut. That night, Evelyn slept with an easier heart. She dreamed of cradling a newborn, a baby with bright eyes and soft wisps of hair, safe in arms that no longer felt the ache of betrayal. She woke remembering that the real work was just beginning. But for once, she saw a glimmer of genuine possibility in the distance. February arrived with a mix of freezing rain and occasional bursts of sunshine, mirroring the uncertain progress between Evelyn and Hannah. Their phone calls became more frequent, though cautious. Hannah regularly updated Evelyn on her pregnancy milestones, the wiggly baby hiccups, the choice of pastel green walls for the nursery corner, the name options she and Nathan were debating. Not all the updates were pleasant. Hannah confessed how stressful it was to juggle bills. She had left her previous job, claiming it was too physically demanding. Nathan's second job brought in some income, but medical expenses stacked high. Though Evelyn sympathized, she remained firm about not offering money unless the baby's direct welfare was at stake. Hannah, to her credit, never asked. Meanwhile, Evelyn persisted in her volunteering at the women's shelter. She found meaning in helping others sort out their lives, even as she sorted out her own. She donated old clothes, taught a few cooking tips, and shared polite camaraderie with women rebuilding after personal crises. One day, Ms. Vargas approached her with a question. "Would you consider making our shelter a beneficiary in your will? I recall you mentioning it before." Evelyn felt a pang. thinking of the changes she'd already made in her estate plan. I have, she said softly. I still want to leave something for Hannah's child, but a large portion will go to the shelter. It feels right, Ms. Vargas squeezed her hand. That's incredibly generous. I'm sure your family will understand. Would they? Evelyn mused privately. She had set aside a modest trust for the grandchild, but the bulk of her estate no longer went to Hannah. Would Hannah see it as a betrayal? Or would she finally understand that unconditional inheritance wasn't guaranteed in mid-February? A call came from Hannah's mother-in-law, Mary Reed, who sounded unexpectedly cordial. Evelyn, I'm hosting a small baby shower for Hannah next weekend. She wants you there. It'll be just a few friends. Nothing extravagant. Evelyn hesitated. She invited me. Yes, Mary said gently. She specifically asked me to call you. She's trying. You know Evelyn's heart fluttered. I appreciate the invitation. I'll come. At the shower, held in Mary's comfortable suburban home, Evelyn arrived bearing a practical gift, a diaper bag filled with essentials diapers, wipes, baby blankets, and some gentle skincare items. Hannah, looking radiant and quite round, embraced her mother with genuine warmth. Nathan lingered by the snack table, occasionally glancing over with a look that blended shyness and relief. The gathering was small, just Mary, a couple of Hannah's old friends, and one neighbor. They played light-hearted shower games, cut into a modest cake, and admired the tiny outfits Hannah unwrapped. Evelyn watched from a chair off to the side, feeling both gratitude and lingering caution. She still carried scars from months earlier, but for Hannah's sake, she tried to stay present. At one point, Hannah held up a soft, ruffled baby dress, tears filling her eyes. All of this, it's so overwhelming, she murmured. I'm grateful everyone is here, especially you. Mom, Evelyn's chest constricted with emotion. I wouldn't miss it, she said softly. A flicker of regret passed over Hannah's expression, as though remembering the carrot cake that was never shared on her own birthday. But she quickly tucked that away, focusing on the future. Evelyn saw the effort and respected it. After the shower, as they cleaned up plates and wrapping paper, Hannah asked Evelyn to stay for a short walk around Mary's neighborhood. The air was cool but bearable, so they strolled carefully. Hannah's pace slowed by her belly. They spoke of the baby's due date, how Nathan had read a parenting book, and how Hannah planned to handle the early weeks. Evelyn listened, offering supportive remarks without preaching. She didn't want to scare Hannah off or revert to the dynamic of self-sacrifice. Instead, she aimed for gentle encouragement, trusting Hannah to ask for help if she truly wanted it. As they parted ways, Hannah gripped Evelyn's arm. Thank you for coming, she said earnestly. I know we still have issues, but I hope this baby can bring us closer. I'd like to do better by you. Evelyn's eyes burned with tears. She simply nodded, hugging her daughter carefully around the bulge of new life. If Hannah truly wanted change, Evelyn would remain open yet also grounded. No matter how the next weeks unfolded, she had learned that her self-respect could not be bartered again. On a chilly March morning, Evelyn's phone buzzed at dawn. She picked up to hear Hannah's trembling voice. Mom, my water broke. We're at Hartford Memorial. It's early, but the contractions are coming. Can you come? A rush of adrenaline jolted through Evelyn. Of course, she said, already scrambling out of bed. Grace agreed to feed Evelyn's cat while she was gone, and within an hour, Evelyn was on the highway, knuckles whitening around the steering wheel. She replayed the horrifying memory of her last unannounced arrival in Connecticut, forcing it away with the realization that this time, Hannah wanted her there. When she reached Hartford Memorial Hospital, she found Nathan pacing the corridor, anxiety etched into his features. He offered a tense nod, then gestured to the labor and delivery room. Evelyn stepped inside to see Hannah leaning over the bed, breathing through a contraction. The nurse, adjusting the IV, flashed Evelyn a polite smile. Hannah's eyes brimmed with relief when she saw her mother. "Mom," she gasped, sweat beading on her forehead. Evelyn rushed to her side, taking her hand. She did not care in that moment about previous hurts. "I'm here," she whispered. The hours blurred into a cycle of contractions, breathing exercises, and medical checks. Hannah's labor progressed steadily, but not without pain. Nathan stood by her other side, wiping her brow with a damp cloth. Through it all, Evelyn felt a strange mixture of fear and awe, witnessing her daughter endure the primal struggle of bringing new life into the world. Late afternoon sunlight streamed through the window when the nurse announced it was time to push. Hannah, exhausted and tearful, squeezed both Nathan's and Evelyn's hands, crying out with each surge. Evelyn prayed silently for a safe delivery, that mother and child would emerge healthy and strong. At last, a tiny cry pierced the air. The doctor lifted a wriggling newborn, announcing, "It's a girl." Relief and wonder washed over them all. Nathan cut the cord, hands shaking. The nurse placed the baby on Hannah's chest, and Hannah broke into helpless tears, murmuring words of astonished love. Evelyn could hardly breathe, watching the newborn's tiny fingers splay against Hannah's skin. After the medical team finished their checks, they handed the baby, swaddled in a warm blanket, to Evelyn for a moment. She cradled that small bundle, heart flooding with gratitude and tenderness. "Hello," she whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I'm your grandmother." The baby scrunched her face, emitting a soft whimper that already felt like music to Evelyn's ears. Hannah rested back, eyes heavy with exhaustion. Nathan hovered close, leaning to stroke the baby's cheek. They looked at Evelyn, expressions full of fragile hope. There was no talk of finances or grudges here, just the awe of new life. If there was ever a clean slate, it was this miracle cradled in Evelyn's arms. They named her Lily Ann Reed. Evelyn stayed by Hannah's bedside, stepping out only to grab quick bites in the hospital cafeteria. She refused to intrude on father-daughter bonding, but was present whenever Hannah or Nathan asked for an extra hand. "Yes, man." 2 days later, mother and baby were discharged. Evelyn helped them carry supplies to the car, installing a borrowed infant car seat. Lily blinked at the world with wide, unfocused eyes. As they departed, Hannah turned to Evelyn and whispered, "Thank you for being here. I I couldn't have done it without you." Evelyn kissed Lily's forehead. "You did it yourself, my brave girl. I just gave you a hand to hold." Driving away, Evelyn marveled at how drastically life could shift. The cruelty she'd once overheard seemed distant, not forgotten, but eclipsed by the magnitude of this new bond. She vowed not to let illusions blind her again, yet she couldn't help feeling hope bloom. Perhaps Lily's arrival would guide them into a healthier family dynamic, one grounded in true affection, not forced duty or financial ties. The days and weeks following Lily's birth were a blur of late-night feedings, diaper changes, and frantic calls to pediatricians. Hannah, recovering from the physical toll of labor, leaned on Nathan for practical support, yet she also reached out to Evelyn with surprising frequency questions about swaddling, worries about Lily's weight gain, small triumphs like Lily's first bath at home. Evelyn relished these interactions, though she was careful not to overstep. She offered advice when asked but never pushed. Most importantly, she never once suggested money. Hannah and Nathan handled the bills, albeit with difficulty. They rarely spoke of their financial woes, and Evelyn respected that distance. Perhaps Lily's presence had reshaped their priorities, leaving no room for petty resentments. One bright April morning, Evelyn made the trip to see them at their rental apartment. She carried a homemade casserole, planning to stay only an hour or two. The scene she found upon arrival was both chaotic and heartwarming baby gear scattered around the living room. Lily fussing in Hannah's arms, Nathan rummaging for formula. Evelyn stepped in to soothe Lily, rocking gently, while Hannah took a moment to collect herself. "Thanks, Mom," Hannah said, exhaling. "I didn't realize how exhausting this would be." Evelyn offered a wry smile. "Babies have a way of teaching us our limits, but you're doing great." In those small daily details, the old anger between them seemed overshadowed by Lily's needs. Occasionally, a flicker of tension surfaced, like when Hannah bemoaned a late bill or Nathan complained about long work hours. Yet they caught themselves before directly implicating Evelyn, focusing instead on how to manage as a family of three. Evelyn quietly admired that growth, though she recognized it was still fragile. As Lily napped, Hannah asked Evelyn to sit on their lumpy couch. "I need to tell you something," she began, voice tight. "We're behind on rent. We had some unexpected medical bills, and we might have to move somewhere cheaper." Evelyn felt a stab of concern, recalling her vow not to step in financially. "That's hard. I'm sorry," she said, choosing her words carefully. Hannah looked down at her hands, then back at Evelyn. "Before Lily was born, I might have manipulated you into paying, but now I want to figure it out ourselves. It's our responsibility. I just need someone to talk to who won't judge me." Emotion swelled in Evelyn's chest. "I'm here to listen," she said gently. "Always." Hannah's eyes glistened with tears. "Thank you. It means a lot." They talked for a while, going over possible ways Hannah and Nathan could cut costs or look for better employment opportunities. At no point did Hannah ask for a bailout. Evelyn felt a wave of pride in her daughter for taking ownership. It was a marked change from the entitlement that once fueled their interactions. Before leaving, Evelyn spent a few minutes cuddling Lily, who stirred awake. The baby's gaze was unsteady, but her tiny hand curled around Evelyn's finger. In that fragile contact, Evelyn found a reaffirmation of hope. They might never erase the past, but they could write a healthier future, one day at a time. Driving home, Evelyn allowed herself a smile. She was still leaving the bulk of her estate to the women's shelter. She believed in that cause deeply, but she'd also created a small trust for Lily, ensuring her granddaughter would have educational opportunities later on. She doubted Hannah and Nathan even knew about that yet, but if they continued on this path of self-sufficiency, that trust might one day help Lily soar. For now, Evelyn focused on being present for the life blossoming before her. As the spring sun glinted off newly green branches, she felt her spirit lighten. She had broken free from an unhealthy pattern, rediscovered her own worth, and gained a new family member who symbolized fresh beginnings. Perhaps that was enough to quiet the echo of Hannah's old words, letting them fade into a distant memory. Summer arrived in a wave of warm breezes and the sweet scent of flowering shrubs around Millbridge. Evelyn relished her time in the garden, pruning roses and planting new perennials. Whenever she felt a pang of loneliness, she reminded herself that she was no longer truly alone. She had Grace next door, her fellow volunteers at the women's shelter, and now Hannah tentatively rebuilding their connection. Lily grew plumper, her giggles more frequent as she learned to roll and babble. Hannah occasionally sent short videos, capturing Lily's first attempts at lifting her head or grabbing her toes. Evelyn saved each clip on her phone, cherishing the small glimpses into her granddaughter's everyday life. However, not everything was rosy. One afternoon, Hannah called, voice trembling. "Mom, the landlord gave us a final notice. We have to leave at the end of the month unless we pay everything we owe. We can't afford it right now." Evelyn's stomach tightened. This was precisely the kind of scenario that once would have led to tearful pleas for financial rescue. No, I said so. She could almost hear the unspoken question in Hannah's tone. Did she want to swoop in and write a check? But Hannah surprised her. We found a cheaper place a few blocks away. She continued, It's not perfect, but I think we can make it work. We just have to pack up and move fast. Could you help me with the baby on moving day? Not money, just an extra set of hands. Relief and admiration coursed through Evelyn. She agreed without hesitation. When the day came, Evelyn arrived early, wearing comfortable clothes, prepared to rock Lily while Hannah and Nathan lugged boxes. The new apartment was even smaller, lacking the dishwasher and in-unit laundry they once took for granted. Still, Hannah maintained a calm determination. She told Evelyn she believed they'd be okay. It's forced me and Nathan to rely on each other instead of looking for a financial shortcut, Hannah admitted with a faint laugh. Evelyn beamed inwardly at her daughter's resolve. By late evening, they finished unpacking the basics. Lily fussed from overstimulation, so Evelyn rocked her to sleep in a corner away from the chaos. That quiet moment reminded Evelyn how far they had come. Months ago, she feared she'd never even hold this grandchild. Before leaving, Evelyn paused at the doorway, turning back to see Hannah leaning against Nathan, both exhausted. I'm proud of you two, she said softly. You're doing what's necessary for your family. Hannah's eyes shone with weary gratitude. Thanks, Mom. Driving home that night, Evelyn recognized the subtle transformation in their relationship. No longer was Hannah pressuring her for bailouts. Instead, they supported each other in more honest, personal ways. She also knew she had to remain vigilant, not letting old habits creep back. It was easy to imagine stepping in with her checkbook whenever Hannah faced a crisis, but that would undo the progress they'd made. In her living room, Evelyn reread the new version of her will that Veronica Sharp had sent over, verifying the details: a substantial donation to the women's shelter, a trust for Lily, and a small bequest for Hannah. She pondered whether to revise it again, but decided not to. The current arrangement reflected her values, supporting a vital community cause and ensuring Lily's future without enabling unhealthy dependence. Satisfied, Evelyn slipped the document back into its envelope. She sipped chamomile tea, gazing out her window at the moonlit garden. Summer nights in Millbridge were tranquil, the air thick with the hum of insects. She felt at peace in a way she hadn't in a long time. Her daughter had hurt her deeply, but Lily's presence seemed to coax them both toward a more genuine relationship, one she intended to protect by standing firm in her boundaries. As August rolled in, Lily was nearly 5 months old, cooing and smiling at anyone who caught her eye. Hannah's stress levels had eased now that they settled into the cheaper apartment. Nathan landed a slightly better position at work, giving them a small buffer for bills. Evelyn's visits became a pleasant routine. She would drop by with homemade meals or fresh produce from her garden, spending time with Lily while Hannah caught a break. One sunny weekend, Hannah proposed an outing to a local park. She invited Evelyn, hoping Lily's first experience of grass and open skies would be memorable. That Saturday morning, they all piled into Nathan's used sedan, which rattled but still ran. Evelyn sat in the back seat beside Lily's car seat, waving a toy rattle to keep the baby entertained. At the park, they found a shady spot under an old maple tree. Nathan laid out a blanket, and Hannah placed Lily down with a small sun hat to protect her delicate skin. The baby wiggled, eyes widening at the rustle of leaves and the bright flashes of sunlight. Evelyn knelt beside her, heart swelling at Lily's wonder. They passed an hour in pleasant conversation, nibbling on sandwiches and fruit. Nathan, wearing a rare grin, tried to make Lily laugh by blowing raspberries. Hannah snapped photos, promising to send them to Evelyn later. At one point, Hannah turned to Evelyn, her tone warm. Thanks for coming. It feels nice to just be a family doing normal things. Evelyn felt a lump in her throat, recalling the anguish of that rainy night. If someone had told her then that she'd be sitting here, months later, sharing an afternoon with Hannah and Nathan peacefully, she wouldn't have believed it. I'm grateful too, she said softly. They strolled along a paved path after lunch, Lily in a stroller. Evelyn listened as Hannah spoke about possibly returning to part-time work once Lily was older, how she might rely on a friend for daycare. Nathan chimed in about his plan to take online classes, aiming to finish a degree he had abandoned years ago. Their goals sounded modest yet hopeful, a far cry from the lavish, debt-fueled ambitions they once pursued. It was a snapshot of genuine domestic joy, no talk of co-signing, no hidden resentments. When Lily grew fussy, Evelyn took over, gently rocking the stroller until the baby drifted off to sleep. Hannah placed a hand on Evelyn's shoulder. You've been amazing, she whispered. Not just with Lily, but everything. I know we can't erase the past, but I want you to know I see the good in you now, not just the help. Tears pricked Evelyn's eyes as she patted Hannah's hand. That means more than you know, she murmured. It wasn't a perfect apology for all the scornful remarks, but it felt sincere. They shared a brief, tight hug, overshadowed only by the knowledge of how fragile reconciliation could be. Later that evening, Evelyn returned home feeling a glow of contentment. She thought of calling Grace to recount the day's events. But first, she wandered into her back garden, gazing at the tomatoes ripening on their vines. She recalled how Harold used to love planting tomatoes, how he'd grin seeing each plump fruit appear. She hoped he could see them now, see how she was finding a new equilibrium after the heartbreak of losing him and nearly losing Hannah. Yes, scars remained. She still sometimes woke from nightmares where Hannah's scornful laughter echoed. Yet real laughter, the kind she had heard today, went a long way toward rewriting the narrative. She reminded herself that love was a choice one she was making cautiously, with her eyes open to the potential of being hurt again. But Lily's gummy smile and Hannah's renewed warmth made that risk feel worthwhile. That night, Evelyn drifted to sleep with an image of the four of them under the maple tree at the park, a quiet slice of familial peace that, once upon a time, she thought impossible. By early autumn, Lily was 6 months old, babbling streams of syllables and reaching for everything in sight. Hannah and Nathan continued to make ends meet, inch by inch. Evelyn maintained her boundary of non-financial support, yet offered emotional backing whenever Hannah needed to vent. She also donated more time at the women's shelter, finalizing her estate plans with a sense of conviction she hadn't felt before. One crisp morning, Hannah called, asking if they could come visit Millbridge for a weekend. We want Lily to see where I grew up, she said, an almost shy note in her voice. Is that all right? Evelyn's heart soared. Absolutely, she replied. I'll get the guest room ready unless you'd prefer a hotel. Hannah laughed. The guest room is fine. We don't want to impose, but it'd be nice. A week later, they arrived in the same rattling sedan, Lily fussy from the drive. Evelyn greeted them on her front porch, arms wide. Once they settled, she took Lily into the living room, showing the baby a corner where Hannah's childhood photos hung. Hannah stood by, a mix of nostalgia and sheepishness on her face. This was my old dance recital picture, Hannah said, pointing to a frame showing a younger, freckle-faced girl in a ballet tutu. I was so proud of that costume. Evelyn smiled. You wore it around the house for days. They spent the weekend walking around Millbridge, stopping at the public library where Evelyn had once worked, and introducing Lily to neighbors who had watched Hannah grow up. Grace joined them for a simple dinner one evening, regaling them with amusing stories of Evelyn's gardening mishaps. The atmosphere was warm, familial, and wholly unlike the tension of the previous year. On the final morning, while Nathan changed Lily's diaper in another room, Hannah helped Evelyn prepare breakfast. The aroma of scrambled eggs and sizzling bacon filled the kitchen. Out of the blue, Hannah turned off the burner, faced her mother, and said, "I just realized your 79th birthday is coming up soon." Evelyn looked surprised. She rarely made a fuss over birthdays anymore. In a couple of weeks? Yes, she acknowledged. Hannah swallowed, voice trembling with sincerity. "I'd like to plan something. A small gathering. Maybe just dinner here or at our place. I want to show you how much you matter to me and to Lily." Evelyn felt tears welling. She recalled the agony of hearing Hannah belittle her 78th birthday less than a year ago, overhearing that she was too clingy and old. "That's very sweet, Hannah," she murmured, clearing her throat. "Thank you." They embraced, the kitchen momentarily filled with the sound of sizzling eggs and emotional release. Evelyn recognized that the wound wouldn't fully vanish overnight, yet each genuine effort to connect layered a balm over old hurts. Hannah wasn't perfect, but she was trying, and for Evelyn, that was enough to nurture hope. Later that day, after they headed back to Connecticut, Evelyn wandered the house, tidying up. She found Lily's tiny socks left behind, a small shirt pattern in pastel. Then, carefully folding them, she smiled at the memory of Lily squirming in her arms, eyes bright with curiosity. She thought about how quickly everything had changed in one year, from hearing her daughter wish her gone to cradling a grandchild with fresh possibilities. In her study, a single legal folder held the updated will and trust documents. She glanced at them, reaffirming that her decision still felt right. She refused to revert to the caretaker role that had once trapped her in Hannah's eyes. Instead, she would remain the mother and grandmother who loved deeply but valued herself enough not to be exploited again. The path they had carved was unconventional, but it was theirs. Outside, autumn leaves swirled in a brisk wind, painting the air with flecks of gold and crimson. Evelyn stepped onto her porch, inhaling the crisp scent of impending change. She closed her eyes, recalling the silent vow she had made to herself months ago. "I am worth more than this." She had honored that vow, and in doing so, she found a version of family that was more honest, more resilient, and perhaps more tender than any illusion she once clung to. Turning to go back inside, she thought of Lily's new smile, Hannah's halting apologies, and Nathan's subdued respect. This was life imperfect, evolving, and real. And for Evelyn Brooks, at 79, it was more than enough.